Welcome to a Nothing from Nothing production. Hello, everybody. This is Mark Christopher with Bill Turley, and this is the Junction podcast, a podcast about growing up in Brooklyn in the 1970s and 80s. We're hoping to protect the names of the innocent as well as the extremely guilty, and there were plenty of those. Well, here goes. Welcome back to the Brooklyn Junction. Well, today's episode is about some of the sunnier experiences we had, part two of our look back at 1977 and that particularly pivotal year that was very formative for all of us. Excuse me, bro. Are you like forgetting something, man? What would that be? Yo, man, the Grateful Dead are like the greatest band in history, man, you know? Oh, yes, I almost forgot. I'm going to go through some of our history chasing the Grateful Dead as well. Hello, Bill. How are you today?
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm outstanding. And we have Paul X. He is the grandnephew of Malcolm X. No, I'm just kidding. We have Paul X joining us as well. And Paul, how are you today, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on your podcast, Mark and Bill.
And I'm really happy to have you. We've referenced you obliquely about 16 times, and I didn't use your last name on some of the episodes, so I just said a good friend. But
that's
anyway,
part of our policy here of protecting the innocent and the extremely guilty. So
it's our motto. Protect the innocent and the extremely guilty. So what was interesting when I was putting this together, because there were so many awakenings for me musically, but there was also just this gasp of absolute freedom. Little kid freedom where I'm 16, going on, I am 16, going on 17. You know,
yeah.
And Bill, you were 34 at the time, right?
Yeah, well, I'm 3 years older than you are, so like I was already a cog in the wheel, so it wasn't a summer.
Well, Paul, you were with me side by side that summer, and I just remember, because I made a point of imprinting it, and this is totally true. I'm sitting in a church across from our mutual friend Mike's house. On the steps, you're there, and
Wait, are you sitting on a church or in a church?
Sitting on the steps.
That makes far more sense. Okay.
The steps in front of the church.
Yeah.
And I remember going, my God, this was just such a glorious summer, you know? And I felt it was never ending. It was just continuous. And I said to myself, remember how happy and free, because I was aware of the tsunami, the impending doom of going to work, though it all worked out in the end. But all responsibilities, accountabilities, I was on my own pretty much at 18. I knew I was
going pose, as John Lennon would say.
That's right. So I remember this absolute kinetic freedom and joy. And I remember it culminated, which we'll go into in a little bit, in a visit to see the Grateful Dead in Englishtown, New Jersey, which is an incredible moment in all our lives. I remember you giving me an album, Surrealistic Pillow.
Right, you haven't given back to me.
So, still down. I still have the original album.
Yeah, my original album. He's still resting his head on it. Mark is a notorious album.
40 albums from the Turley Brothers. That
right. Tom and I would always joke about, like when we would discover a piece of our collection in your collection, and say, I bought that at Titus Oaks. Don't tell me. You have that great too. That is my album.
I was so bad with that. I stole from John Lombardi's brother a whole bunch of, I was getting into disco, the same year that disco emerged in 1977. He got so mad that he started writing "This Is My Property" on the album cover.
And that's a podcast, disco.
Yeah. And I literally looked through my albums recently, and I found 5 or 6 of his,
right?
And it was
it's buried in there with my reggae anthology volume 3 album there.
It is. In fact, it is.
Uh-huh.
But you would turn me on to Jefferson Airplane.
Yes.
And I wore the grooves out of Surrealistic Pillow. So
the album.
Yeah, they became the first commercial success out of the San Francisco sound in 1967. By 1977, they were kind of slick and bullshitting unlike the great that, but that I digress.
By what year?
1977.
I mean, they were like the funk by the
Starship, right there.
Yeah.
Starship stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff was authentic and brilliant. And what's your recollections of that record and why you turned me on?
I remember, if I haven't, my older brother John, who will be on this program at some point, he had great musical taste, and I remember what brought the album home. And we always had some pretty good music around our house, but hearing that, it was like, wow, there's something else other than the Beatles out there, And I was only about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old when he brought that home, and I was just floored by it. And then, I know that he and his buddies from Nazareth used to go to the Fillmore East pretty regularly, and they'd catch their show. They played there pretty often. It was a favorite venue for them. And man, I was just so envious, being 8 years younger. I was like, man, I wish I could have gone to those shows. But, I know we're going to talk about the Grateful Dead. And those two bands were pretty well connected. In fact, on Surrealistic Pillow, if you look at the liner notes on the back, there's a kind of a collage on the back. But if you look in there carefully, it'll say Spiritual Advisor Jerry Garcia. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. Did he produce that album too?
I think what happened is I read some history on it. What happened with the Surrealistic Pillow was they had a real kind of commercial poppy producer, and they were getting very nervous because their earthy blues sound combined with the incredible vocals of Ray Slick and Marty Balin.
Yeah.
Right. And the guy was not capturing the sound, so they brought him in, and they called him Spiritual Advisor.
Yeah, okay.
And he kind of took over without getting credit or money to produce the sound. I've always struck by the first line of Somebody to Love, right? It's when the truth is found to be lies and all the joy within you dies, right?
Yeah.
When the truth is found to be lies, and all the joy within you dies. Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find somebody to love. Love.
Well, I mean, they were. I saw them a couple of times actually at Starship in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
You mean like when they built the city on rock and roll?
They hated
exactly. So my first concert was I went to see Hot Tuna at the New York Academy of Music, which had been an old opera house, and it was on 14th Street and Irving Place, right near the Con Edison headquarters there, and it's like a Trader Joe's now or something like that. It became the Palladium.
Palladium was amazing.
I know we've gone to a couple of shows. I know we saw the Police there, but when it was the Academy of Music, it was kind of rickety and old and falling down. But I think I also saw Judas Priest there of all bands. But it was like the closest thing you could get to the Fillmore East at that point, because the Fillmore East had closed by the time I saw them. That was in 1973. But I mean, once I saw them, I was hooked. I went out, got the Burgers album, and this was a bunch of guys from Nazareth who just got tickets, and we went. And I remember it was like a great experience. So I was kind of hooked on them there for a while. And so fast forward years later, I had the privilege of meeting Eeyore McAlkin, who was lead guitar player for Jefferson Airplane, and he and Jack Cassidy were the two frontmen for Hot Tuna. And I mean, he's such a great guy, and he's such an incredible guitar player. I took his class that was like way over my head because, I mean, he's such an amazing guitar picker. But it was a great experience. I stayed at the ranch that he had operating called the Fur Peace Ranch. It's in Meigs County, Ohio. and my wife Elaine set me up with that first weekend there, and it was amazing. It was like,
Astonishing. That's
yeah,
a great experience.
I mean, I held his guitar, I had conversations with him, and it was just. But I wound up going back 4 or 5 times later, and unfortunately with COVID, the ranch kind of shut down and stopped doing classes there. Everything went virtual. I did take a virtual class with Jack Cassidy, the bass player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just very, very cool. But to learn some of the history and some of the secrets of the recording and all that went into Surrealistic Pillow and the other albums, it was just it was a great experience. So there's a special place in my heart for Hot Tuna and Jefferson Airplane. He was really always a blues guy, and the Jefferson Airplane was more like an acid rock, progressive rock type band. That really wasn't where his roots were. He was, more, a blues guitar player. And, there's some famous tapes of him with Janis Joplin. And they call them, I think they call them like the typewriter tapes or something like that, where, she's singing, he's accompanying her, and Yorma's wife at the time is typing something in another room, so you can hear the typewriter clicking, while they're...
Well, they could AI that now, man.
Yeah.
Last one in song.
Yeah.
Was she in time? Was the tempo correct?
Embryonic Journey was like the first kind of acoustic solo song that I listened to.
Oh, that's a great piece, and but he's got so many others. I don't know if you've ever heard the Water Song. That's another instrumental.
No.
That's on the Burgers album, Hot Tuna. There's another great one. And it's just his technique is just so incredible, and he really is such a good guy.
You might remember this, Bill. I know they used to say hot effing tuna, right?
Yeah.
Was it maybe?
That the camp that he ran with his wife. His wife's name is Vanessa. It was just such a magical place. It really was, and I was so sad to see it end, but he's still touring though.
See that girl barefoot in the lawn, whistling and singing, she's carrying on. And laughing in her eyes, dancing in her feet, she's a neon light fine and she can dance on the street. Hey, 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 coming by every day. Hey, 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 coming by.
Well, the biggest band to emerge out of that San Francisco scene was clearly the Grateful Dead. For a long period of time, I was relatively dubious of them when I was a youngster because it was just too much of like a cult-like status. But once I started listening to them and why I think they're so enduring, and they are such an amazing institution even to this day, is their musical vocabulary was the entire songbook of Western civilization. So they had folk influence, blues influence, rock influence, gospel influence. All of their musical vocabulary was unbelievably extensive. So it makes them endlessly interesting. What I fell in love with mostly was Jerry Garcia's guitar playing, which I think is particularly unique, right, Bill?
Yeah, well, he plays in a mode which, well, not always, but very often plays in a mode called the Mixolydian mode. It's very interesting, the scale structure, and there are other artists that play that in that mode as well. But he's probably the most well known of the rock musicians that plays in Mixolydian. And in fact, in the day, it had Wake of the Blood. But
That's because you got it in the discount bit.
probably,
right?
yeah, I got it. Sam Goody
Said, "Oh, no, let's get
with
this
the little
discount
point cut out there for $2.99, and I just developed a new appreciation for them. Yeah. Pretty recently, I played in a Grateful Dead tribute project, which is just a temporary thing. But boy, it was so much fun, and I really I played the bass actually, and oh man, it was just kind of eerie because I was playing the bass in this tribute band, and the night we played, which was down at the bitter end, it was the day that Phil Lesh passed away. And it was just
Wow. So this is
way too eerie for me.
Look out of any window, any morning, any evening, any day. Maybe the sun is shining, birds are winging, no rain is falling from a heavy sky. What do you want me to do for you, to see you through? For this is all a dream we dreamed one afternoon long ago. Walk out of any doorway, feel
And
the way
we bought these tickets to the Grateful Dead, and it was going to be our end of summer bash on Saturday in Englishtown, New Jersey. And the thing is, the fact that we're 16, right? We all convinced our parents that we could go away to this festival like our older brothers and sisters did with Woodstock and Watkins Glen. And we convinced them we're going to go see the Grateful Dead, and it was New Riders of the Purple Sage, and I think Marshall Tucker, if I'm correct. And my mother gave me a bag with like 6 dimes and says, if I'm not, just call me. Call me once or twice a day and leave a message if I'm not here. It was unbelievable that we were able to get away.
How did that work back then? I mean, convincing your parents to, at the age of 16 to go away for like a weekend,
I don't know.
I mean, it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, more than a weekend. I mean,
I don't remember having anything more than if I had $20 from my mom, God rest her soul, or, like bus fare, I guess we had, whatever it was, $16 round trip. She packed, typical Italian style, like a bunch of eggplant sandwiches for me. And that was it, man. I don't think I had $20, if that. And so how do we convince them? I don't know. You say, oh, Mom, we're going here. Then and you tell them you're going. And just like you used to hitchhike to the beach when you were 12, and they say, okay,
Well, I went camping with you at 13 at Harriman for 3 days. So convincing her at 13 was probably, but there was a little bit more of the Roger Miller King of the Road type mentality that, there wasn't a conscious concern about all the dangers. There wasn't that was out there. And my mother was like freaked out when she went to work, because I think she would have had Labor Day off, but she went to work and her boss opened up the Daily News. And I was home now and I was at school and everything was fine. Right. And he puts the centerfold of the Daily News in front of her and shows that there's 177,000 people in aerial shot. And it just says, that's where your son was.
that's
Like he said it relatively with the judge, and she brought it home. And she goes, you didn't tell me it was this massive rock concert. And I miss her so much. It's beyond comprehension. She was, but I think I hoodwinked her, hoodwinked her that, hey, it's okay. I'm with a bunch of guys. We're going to be fine.
well,
You're like, whoa.
when we grew up, it was a community. I guess it was the tail end of the baby boom. There were so many families. Everyone had kids. And it really was, that takes a village thing or whatever.
If we take us through the journey there, right? And we literally go to Port Authority, take a bus to Englishtown, New Jersey. And I don't know who was smart enough to have like a couple of gallon things of water. I remember that. And I don't know which one of us, I'm thinking it was you, Paul, like your mother was a little more cluey. Hey, they're going away. Hey, let's give a jug of water. But so we go there. You've got eggplant sandwiches in your knapsack. I've got nothing but Hostess treats. I act like a typical stoner, right?
breakfast of champion.
I have devil dogs, like 2 boxes of devil dogs. I mean, and I remember it because I was like, okay, I could live on devil dogs. I mean, I was so skinny, And so I've got devil dogs. We get there, and then we have to hitch from the bus station to the racetrack, right?
And it's still to this day, after that particular concert, they refused to have any more rock concerts at the Englishtown Raceway. And we get there, and we hitch with these really, it was like recreating our image of the hippie experience, what we had heard, which has been mythologized, right? The Watkins Glen, the Woodstock, we fulfilled it, man. We hitched to that place, and we're sitting outside the front gates, and everybody's crashing. Normal people are crashing, but I'm up for some reason, all excited to be there. And Kenny Heavey and I are with this guy, right? And you were there too, Paul. So we're sitting around him, and we want to get stoned. So the guy starts sharing the most disgusting, skunky kind of pot I've ever had in my life.
Homegrown.
And we're smoking it, and we're like looking at him. And then you go, what? And he had this gnarly beard, and he looked borderline homeless. And you said to him, what, did you grow that shit in your beard? The guy gets offended. Hey, I'm turning you on, man. I'm turning you on. Beggars can't be choosy, And
I remember them being very nice, though. And there was the young man.
they were nice.
Sherlock Holmes.
They were nice. They were
No, he had the Sherlock Holmes pipe. I'm sorry. They were smoking it out of the Sherlock Holmes pipe, which will kind of give you a little indication of, what they were like.
Yeah, and what happened was so we fell asleep. And I think you slept on a rock or something.
Oh, I had like a rock for my pillow, man. Ugh.
Yeah. And I put my devil dog bag like underneath my head. And this is the most interesting thing. I did not remember this. This is astonishing. So let's say I remember looking at some beautiful girls dancing. There was like those tents they have at dead shows, people selling trinkets and stuff. Well, we're right up against the front gate. We're there at like 7 o'clock the night before. We party, we fall asleep, and, I had borrowed everything I had. Whether I borrowed a knapsack from you, whatever it was all borrowed, right? And we fall asleep. And then at 3 a.m, the organizers must have recognized that, hey, it'll make our lives easier if we start letting them in. It's general admission. So they let us all in, and we run with our knapsacks and our waters and our eggplant sandwiches, run to, within 40 rows or so. And we almost have this sort of hippie camp of our group, right? With the 6 or 7 of us in a circle.
Folks
We
around
go
to
back
get
to
to know.
sleep. And this is the astonishing thing. We're asleep for hours, and I forgot about this till our good friend Kenny mentioned it. He said, I just remember the sun comes up, and it's been up for a bit, and I'm ignoring it. And then all of a sudden, it's beautiful, and it's bright.
Yeah, it's very
Gorgeous out.
cute.
And he looks around, and he looks behind us, and there's 150,000 people behind.
You wake up and there they are.
Yeah, and he said he couldn't believe that it was a ragtag of maybe 3,000 people, or maybe less than that got in the night
Good
before,
morning,
and then he
people.
was waking up
Right.
and pounding devil dogs with me, right? And so the show, everybody got destroyed by it physically and from no sleep or whatever. And I remember our good friend Steve, and he doesn't mind me mentioning it, got the flu. Everybody got some sort of weird, lack of sleep flu except me. And I remember him sitting there, and he couldn't even focus on the show. Right? Because the devil dogs, that's what saved you, though.
Right.
And so
Yeah, it was a tough night the night before.
the virus didn't have a chance with those chemicals around. But then I had to hit the men's room. I run and find one of the porta potties. I come back, and I'm going, all right, at least I got some devil dogs, all right? I come back to all of the sleeping bags and everything else, and all of the devil dogs have been torn through and eaten. Every one of them are gone, right? And the waters are empty. And I look around, and it's all those guys from Flatlands Park, many of which are now dead. They're all,
Steven's friends.
yeah, Steven's friends. And I was like, I never was a fan of any of them, to be honest with you, but they were kind of a rougher, tougher crowd. I think some of them did heroin, whatever. But
Yeah, it was a little tougher, yeah.
yeah, they were also just fucked up. And I look at them and I said, what the fuck? Who ate all my devil dogs? And they said, not us. And they all had chocolate all over their face.
Yeah. wasn't until The Dead came on that I started to feel Norman, and that was at sundown, because they had the new riders opened up in the afternoon, and then Marshall Tucker.
Away by that show. I was, I remember hearing Estimated Prophet and Bob Weir going, na, 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 you like that kind of stuttering things in the bridge, and Eyes of the World, which I thought was like some, manna from it. I was stunned. And the thing that blew me away most was how Jerry Garcia, as a guitar player, wrapped around the melodies. And I was just so musically intrigued. Later shows I danced and did other things, but this show I was just locked in on how incredible this band was.
Yeah, the stage was beautiful. It was a beautiful night. It was lit beautifully. It was during the Terrapin Station record. I love seeing the two drummers in the background. They were, obviously they were a little bit higher than everybody else, above everybody else. And the stage looked great, and it was a new experience for me, seeing a rock show. When you're not familiar with it. I mean, I used to see
Festival.
so they didn't have a lot of lighting. It was daytime shows. They didn't have the projection of the album cover or other things. But yeah, it sounded great. And of course, the big drum solo when they played Terrapin was a biggie for me, since I love the drums. Yep, it was a big.
Excellent drummer. Excellent drummer.
Thank you. It was our friend Tom that was the first kid into the Dead. When we were in 12, 14, 13, I remember he had was it the Live Dead record, or one of the records, Skull and Roses, where you opened it up, it was a gatefold, and there was a photo of them. And I remember as a kid, probably in the 7th grade, going, wow, these are some of the ugliest people I've ever seen, You got, I think they tried to look ugly. You got Rod McCurran, Pigpen, and their all faces were pockmarked and everything. Well, wow, look at these guys. And the way they looked and dressed. And our lovely friend, he was a big fan before any of us were.
Well, Tommy was always the coolest. He was always a little ahead of the curve on the music, and he was so open to all stuff, at the time. I had heard, and I don't know if it's apocryphal, but Tommy, and we're not using last names, I actually heard he was dancing in his underwear on the other side of the stage. Pulling molecules out of the air,
That was a popular thing that people did back then. Like he was.
I might have nerd. He might have been
exactly.
Like this guy, Fat Man. I think they called him Fat Man from Junction. I know where he is. He's on the side of the stage and he's dancing, And I'm like, Tommy was not a small man. He was always, so just the concept of it. I'm so free, man. I could dance in my underwear, And the wild thing is we must have made a plan, because we all ended up back at the bus station starved. And we're like...
It's amazing that we were able to regroup, because all the stuff separated.
Maybe we lost Tommy.
I remember being alone after the show, and I had no money, I had no food. And then I was miracle, because some guy had these watermelons that, I don't know if he was selling them, what he was doing, but he was giving them to me for free, and I was eating them, and I was like, I feel better now. And then I was walking with my head down, like, ooh, what was me? I have no money, blah, blah, blah. And I was miracle the second time.
Everybody saying my box devil dogs. I'm sorry.
No, and I saw that, and I saw $20 on laying there on the ground. So I was like, oh, I'm all set now. But how we regrouped is phenomenal to me. But I guess we all had a destination, which was the bus stop. So we all felt
what it is. What it was is also just the concept of "I need a miracle" as a phrase when people don't have tickets outside Grateful Dead shows. I need a miracle, and you had a miracle. And there was also a pretty cool. You could say there was some Spidey Kids, and it had its elements of drug bit, but it was a very kind of communal, hippie ethic. We were living that as kids. We were like, hey, we're all out for each other. There was no ingrained selfishness. And, so for instance, if you didn't share your joint, you were called a Bogart, remember? I don't know why.
Bogart the joint.
You're Bogart in the joint, man.
There's a song called Don't Bogart the Joint, my friend, right?
That's what around.
And We didn't carry around these little narcissism machines with full cable systems in them and GPS. When you were lost outside the concert with no money, you were lost. But at that concert, at the end of the show, they did Trunket, right? And it was, what a long, strange trip it's been. And I remember the chills up my spine. I feel it right now. The chills up my spine, like, wow, we're 2 days on the road as 16-year-olds. What a long, strange trip it's been.
Sometimes the lights are shining on me. Other times I can barely see. Lately it occurs to me. What a long, strange trip it's been. Trucking, I'm going home.
Hey, and what about Bob Ware, man? Bottom line, yeah, he is a little bit unheralded, and I recommend if you have
Saturday night.
on Netflix the other one, which is all about his journey, you know? And the amount of women he had was, forget about it. Being a good-looking guy in a hippie band.
It's like here you have a rock band where everybody's ugly but one guy. What do you think's gonna happen? Could you imagine like if there was a female band and they were all ugly, but one of them was good looking? Well,
Besides tapping into the hippie ethic, I think why they were so enduring and still are enduring is there was integrity. There was a lot of integrity to the music, besides all the idioms that they drew inspiration from. They were filled with integrity. And what better way to end this episode than to bring up their last big hit, which was Touch of Grey, which was so cool in the late 80s for them to have this rousing comeback. They never went away, but this was the peak of their commercial viability, I think. So we'd like to close out the episode, and I want to thank our good friend Paul X for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
enjoyed it.
And Bill, why don't you take us out?
Well, thanks again for listening, everyone. It's a fun episode. Thanks for joining us, Paul. And remember to like and subscribe.
To the Brooklyn Junction.